Welcome back, my friends, to another reading of Dome of the Rath. Chapter 2, Revenge of the White Witch. It was a cold, dark, wet, misty, horrible, foul, despicable, despairing, uneventfully eventful, freezing cold, toxic evening at the holy castle for little sweaty men. Meat was about to be tenderized to a fine pulp at the sandwich venue located on the holy sphere of green and blue commonly referred to as earth inside the school. Smithy, the vice-lord of the realm of little hairy men, was standing in front of tens of thousands of students about to read a boring waste of time called the Daily Notices, meanwhile telling the lesser hairy men to make him a sandwich. Rathbone groaned as he was put out of business. His rumbling groan echoed throughout the hall, smashing several windows. "Coats for all of you," he roared. A sad moan reverberated throughout the great hall as the students reluctantly picked up their bread and butter. Bertie was enjoying himself in the principal's office. Not only was he watching his favorite show, the Kobangwa anime, he was quietly sipping a glass of the finest prune juice in the land, savoring each glorious mouthful as he watched his hero, the almighty Kobangwa, fight off evil living toasters. He turned to the massive portrait of the previous principal, Mr. Ross Brown, hanging on the wall next to him, and a single tear rolled down his cheek. He would never live up to the position of principal like Brown did. The Mr. Brown in the portrait suddenly turned to him, his eyes a glowing red. It spoke in a demonic voice. "You're a mistake," it said. Bertie lurched awake in his armchair, dripping with sweat like Boner's sweaty dome during a Friday night game of poker. He turned to the portrait. The familiar face of Ross Brown was no longer looking at him. He was about to take another sip of prune juice when the portrait ripped open. The white witch of the school, Miss Taylor, leapt out holding a beaker full of deadly eggplant juice. "Kirsten, what are you doing here? That was a $50,000 priceless portrait of Lord Brown himself. Your time at this school is over, Bertram. This eggplant juice will end your reign over this school faster than you can say Ainsley Harriet." The bright moon of a summer's evening shone through the curtain as Bertie slowly maneuvered himself towards his office door. Now, Taylor, let's not do anything hasty," he said slowly, as the White Witch approached, and a horrible odor, as foul as the pits of hell, entered Bertie's nostrils. "The school is mine, Bertram. I'll run it better than you ever did." Bertie suddenly pulled out his massive silk-black principal's cape from behind him just in time to shield himself from Taylor's deadly eggplant juice as she thrust the beaker towards him. A sizzling sound was heard as Bertie's beautiful cape melted. A tear rolled down his cheek, and he took the opportunity to run out his office door. "Get back here, Bertram!" He could hear the wail of the evil demon behind him as he ran down the hall towards the other teachers. He made it to Rathbone's sandwich shack in time. "Wayne," he said between heavy breaths, "it's happening. She's making a move." Rathbone's eyes widened as he slowly lowered his Gatsby sandwich crammed full of triple fried fries. He reached below his desk and pushed a large red button, triggering the loud alarm sirens to wail. "We knew this would happen, Matthew. I'm calling in my battle battalion." With that, the holy, sexy, sweaty dome of Rathbone's began to emit a beautiful faint yellow glow. Rathbone closed his big soft eyes, and as the sirens continued their shrill sound, music could be heard in the distance. Bertie realized that the witch was no longer chasing him, and continued down the hall briskly towards the quad, a large concrete area at the center of the school. When he emerged, he witnessed the greatest sight he would ever behold, an army the likes of which had never been seen. How had Rathbone done this? Where did they come from? How old just was the Holy Dome himself? Bertie stood and watched as a massive army of living skeletons, fresh from the grave, bones and all, stood before him. There was probably 500 or 600 of them, Bertie thought, and all of them were holding long, slender bones. But before he could give it more thought, Taylor was flying toward him. She had launched herself from the roof and was holding a whole eggplant in her hand, pointed right at Bertie. Bertie could do nothing but scream as she flew at him. But suddenly, the alarms stopped. A new sound filled the air. The music he heard before had gotten much louder. He recognized this song from when some students were blaring it over a portable speaker.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine. Shrieking skulls will shock your soul, seal your doom tonight.
And with that, as if a switch had been flicked, all the skeletons charged toward Bertie, pointing their bones in the air like swords. Before the witch could reach Bertie, strong, sure hands grabbed him from behind and yanked him back into the hole out of her way. Bertie was confused, scared, and had already filled his adult diaper when he awoke in the corridor, leaning on Rathbone's sandwich stand. He must have been out for at least 30 seconds, because when he awoke, the skeletons had closed in and now surrounded the witch, who was firing red-hot streams of eggplant juice from her hands, fending them off on either side. Rathbone stood over him in a protective stance. There, he saw the true power of the dome. As the witch slowly approached, still fending off the waves of spooky skeletons, Rathbone bent over. He stood with his legs wide, knees ever so slightly bent. His head was lowered, his gorgeous dome pointed at the witch. Suddenly the hallway was filled with a brilliant bright white light. As Bertie's eyes adjusted, the sight he was beholding would change his view of the beautiful and sexy Rathbone forever. His dome was projecting a sparkling white laser beam of pure light, as a resonating hum emanated throughout the hall. The magnificent beam headed straight towards the witch, who was blown back faster than a snap of Thanos' fingers, and soared out of the school block. The army of eager skeletons chased after her as she went. The light on Rathbone's dome dimmed, and the smell of sweat and fecal matter filled the stuffy school block air. He offered a wrinkly hand to Bertie, and in between panting, spoke one word to Bertie as he helped him up. One word that would change Bertie's life forever. A word that he would remember for many hundreds of years to come. This word would be on his mind during his wedding, during his children's graduation ceremonies, and even in his deathbed. This single word would keep Bertie guessing and wondering about its implications for the rest of his natural life. "Yum," Rathbone said, and ran off after the witch with Bertie trailing behind. Smithy finished reading the holy notices and began to chow down on the massive row of sandwiches the sweaty, hairy young folk had made that sat in front of him. Some of them were good, and he let the few children that made good sandwiches go, with only a firm slap on the rump cheek turning it a deep red hue. However, the sandwiches that were not so great angered Smithy. With crumbs spread across his plump belly, he stood up and triggered the trapdoor, sending little Timmy down to the dungeon beneath the school. He revelled in the screams of the damned as they made their way down to the deepest, darkest, dankest point on planet Earth, where they would spend the rest of their mortal lives in perpetual pain. At around 3 a.m., however, Smithy could hear another sound over the moans of the tired. He heard a rumbling, a sound that could only mean one thing. The witch had struck. He jumped up from his throne, knocking over the mountainous pile of sandwiches in front of him, spreading them all over the whole floor. He waddled over to the door, his fat gut limiting his speed to the minimum, and what he saw when he emerged outside confirmed his suspicions. A massive skeleton army was headed straight for the hall, clambering after something. It was the witch. She was flying ahead of the army, and as the spooky, scary skeleton song entered his eardrums, it was instantly blasted out by the high-pitched sound of the school alarm. Moments later, Bertie and Rathbone ran over, steam swirling above Rathbone's dome. "Bruce, she has made a move," Rathbone said. "She's going to try to take over the school." Smithy put a chubby finger to Rathbone's lips, silencing him. Him and Rathbone had been with the school for a long time, and had gotten to know each other quite intimately. Smithy gingerly slid his fingertip into Rathbone's mouth. He gazed into the big round eyes of the man he had known for so long. "Bruce." Rathbone almost whispered his name, and lifted a hand to Smithy's face, caressing the outside gently. Bertie cleared his throat, breaking up the moment, partly out of impatience, and partly out of jealousy, and as another explosion rang out from the squabble of skeletons fighting the witch's deadly rays, Bertie harbored a slight hatred for Bruce Smith, and the relationship he had built with Rathbone. End of Chapter 2.